It all started with a question I didn't expect and honestly one that caught me off guard more than I cared to admit. I was just hanging out at my friend Jake's house. You know, typical weekend stuff. We were sitting on the couch playing video games when his Aunt Linda walked in. She's this woman who's always been a bit mysterious to me, kind of confident, maybe in her late 40s or early 50s, but still had this vibe like she knew more than she let on. There was something about her presence that always made me feel a little uneasy but curious at the same time. She looked at me with this half smile, that kind of knowing smile, and said, "Tell me honestly, do you like older women?" Her tone was calm, almost casual, but there was an edge to it, like she was testing the waters or maybe just seeing how I'd respond. At first, I thought she was joking. I laughed it off and said, "What? No, I'm just here to see Jake." I didn't want to make things weird or get into something I wasn't prepared for. But she didn't laugh. She just stared like she was waiting for the truth, like she wasn't going to let this go without an answer. I felt this weird mix of embarrassment and curiosity, and honestly a little nervousness I didn't expect. It was just a simple question, but suddenly everything felt heavier, like there was more to it than just small talk. I wanted to say something clever, something that would deflect the situation, but all I could do was nod slowly and say, "Maybe." And that moment, small as it seemed, changed everything. Looking back, I guess I should explain a bit about how I ended up in that situation because on paper, it sounds kind of random, but if you knew Jake's family like I did, it made a little more sense. Jake's Aunt Linda was always this intriguing figure in the background. She was divorced, lived alone in this big cozy house not far from his place, and somehow always seemed to show up at just the right moments. Like she had this uncanny ability to read the room and know when to step in. Like she understood dynamics that I didn't quite grasp. Jake and I have been friends since high school. We were the kind of friends who could hang out for hours without saying much and still feel like we were having a good time. But I never really spent much time with his family. Mostly just holiday dinners or the occasional barbecue here and there. That weekend, Jake's parents were out of town, so he invited me over to crash and catch up. I was dealing with a lot of stuff myself, college stress, job uncertainty, and this gnawing feeling that I was stuck in a loop I couldn't break out of. I remember feeling restless, like I was waiting for something to happen that might shake things up, but nothing ever did. So when Linda showed up, it felt like she brought a sudden shift in energy. She wasn't pushy or overbearing. She was calm, measured, like someone who's had enough life experience to know what's worth pursuing, and what's better left alone. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat down near us, casually joining the conversation, but steering it in ways that made me uncomfortable and curious at the same time. Then came the question. I remember thinking, why ask me that? Was it a joke? Was she testing me? Or was there something else beneath the surface? I could feel Jake watching me, probably wondering what the hell was going on. But I just kept quiet, not wanting to make a scene or bring attention to the weird energy that suddenly filled the room. As the afternoon went on, I realized that question was the start of something I hadn't expected. A slow unraveling of feelings and thoughts that made me question not just what I was attracted to, but who I was becoming. After Linda's question, things shifted in a way I hadn't anticipated. For a few moments, the room felt smaller, like the air had thickened around me. Jake kept quiet, his eyes flicking between me and his aunt, like he was waiting for me to say something, anything. I wasn't sure what to say. I'd never really thought about it out loud before. Sure, I'd noticed older women before on TV or in passing, but had I ever seriously considered it? I mean, I was 22, Jake was 23, and most of the girls we knew were our age or younger. It was what felt normal, what everyone expected. But Linda wasn't just any older woman. There was something about her presence that unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way she carried herself or how calm and confident she seemed in contrast to the uncertainty I was feeling in my own life. Finally I said, I guess maybe I do. There's something different about older women, more grounded. They've been through things. Linda's eyes softened. You're right about that, she said quietly. And it's not just about age. It's about experience, about knowing yourself. I nodded, but inside I was suddenly full of questions I wasn't ready to ask out loud. What did that mean for me? Was I really ready to admit to that? And what did it say about where I was in life? Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about that conversation more than I wanted to admit. Every time I was at Jake's house, Linda seemed to be around. Sometimes just popping in for tea. Sometimes joining our conversations in a way that felt intentional, like she wanted to be part of something unfolding. I started to notice little things. The way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention, or the quiet moments when she'd ask about my plans, my dreams, and whether I felt stuck or restless. One afternoon, Jake was out running errands, and Linda invited me to sit with her in the backyard. The sun was low, casting long shadows, and there was this peacefulness in the air that made me let my guard down. She asked me about my life, my family, and my fears, things I rarely shared with anyone. And somehow, it felt easier talking to her than anyone else. But there was also a tension between us, something unspoken that made my heart race and my mind spin. I kept telling myself it was just curiosity, or maybe the result of loneliness on both our sides. Still, every time I looked at her, I felt this strange pull, like I was on the edge of crossing a line I wasn't sure I wanted to cross, but couldn't stop thinking about. One evening, things came to a head. Jake had gone to a party and Linda invited me over to help her with some work around the house, fixing a shelf, cleaning up the garage. We were working side by side. The silence between us filled with this electric tension. At one point, she looked at me and said softly, "You don't have to be afraid to admit what you feel." I froze. Sometimes, she continued, the things we think we shouldn't want turn out to be exactly what we need. I swallowed hard, heart pounding. I knew what she was saying, and the question was no longer hypothetical. I was at a crossroads between the safe, familiar world I'd always known and something new, forbidden, and uncertain. But I couldn't just tell Jake. I wasn't sure I could even admit it to myself. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment, every look, every word. The tension was suffocating, but I also felt alive in a way I hadn't before. I was caught in a storm of desire, fear, and guilt, and I didn't know how to navigate it without hurting someone. In the days after that evening in the garage, everything started to feel different. I kept replaying Linda's words in my head, the way she said, "You don't have to be afraid to admit what you feel." It was like she'd opened a door I'd been too scared to approach. But with that door open came a flood of guilt. I kept wondering, what if Jake found out? How would he react? He's been my best friend for years. The thought of betraying him, even in my own mind, made me sick. And yet, every time I saw Linda, every time she smiled, that knowing smile, or asked me how I was doing, the pull only grew stronger. I started spending more time at her house, often helping with little things, fixing the leaky faucet, organizing her bookshelf, just hanging out while she made coffee. It felt innocent, but the undercurrent was anything but. There were moments when she'd laugh quietly at some joke I made, or when our hands would brush on purpose, or at least I thought so. I caught myself stealing glances, trying to read the emotions behind her calm exterior. One afternoon, she invited me to sit down with her in the living room. The way she looked at me was different this time, softer, almost vulnerable. She told me about her own struggles, the loneliness after her divorce. The way she felt like people stopped seeing her as a person once she hit her 50s. It made me see her in a new light. She wasn't just the confident aunt who asked the provocative questions. She was someone who had her own fears, her own regrets. That vulnerability made everything more complicated because it wasn't just about attraction anymore. It was about connection, about feeling understood in a way I hadn't felt before. But there was always the shadow of Jake. Every time I looked at Linda, I wondered if I was risking everything, our friendship, the trust we'd built over years. One night, I found myself texting Jake, trying to clear my head, but the words stuck. I couldn't explain the tangled feelings I had. Instead, I just told him I was stressed about school and work. He didn't press me, but I knew he sensed something was off. Meanwhile, Linda started to open up more, too. She shared memories of her youth, talked about mischances, about feeling invisible in a world obsessed with youth. We began to spend more time together, and the lines blurred. Sometimes it felt like we were just two people seeking comfort and understanding. Other times, the tension between us was electric and dangerous. One day, Jake came home early while I was at Linda's. I froze when I heard the front door open. Linda and I exchanged a look, hers full of warning, mine full of panic. Jake wandered into the kitchen unsuspecting. I wanted to tell him everything right then, but I couldn't. The words got caught in my throat. Instead, I smiled awkwardly and said, "Hey, man. What's up?" Jake looked at Linda, then back at me, sensing something unspoken. He gave a small uneasy laugh and said nothing. "Just thought I'd surprise you guys." After he left, Linda sighed deeply. "This can't go on like this," she said quietly. "Not without someone getting hurt." I nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle on me. From that moment, I knew the tension wasn't just about me and Linda anymore. It was about loyalty, trust, and choices that could change everything. The days turned into weeks, and the slow burn of emotions started to take a toll. I couldn't focus on school, couldn't enjoy hanging out with Jake without feeling like I was hiding something huge. Linda and I shared stolen moments, a touch on the arm, a quiet conversation, a look filled with meaning, but always stopped short of crossing a line that could break us all. I was caught in a storm. Desire versus loyalty, curiosity versus guilt, excitement versus fear. And the more I tried to push it away, the more impossible it became. It was like walking a tightrope, one wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. The tension had been building for weeks, and finally it all came to a head. One quiet evening, Jake had invited me over for dinner, wanting to catch up properly. I knew Linda would be there, too. She often joined family dinners, but this time the air was heavier than usual. We sat around the table eating, making small talk. I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on me like a storm waiting to break. Then, out of nowhere, Linda looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You need to tell Jake the truth." My heart skipped. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She continued, "I'm not asking you to make any decisions tonight, but hiding this isn't fair to any of us." I glanced at Jake. He was looking between us, confused, but trusting. That moment felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to jump into the unknown. I realized then that whatever I did next would change everything. I took a deep breath and said, "Jake, there's something I need to be honest about." Before I could finish, Linda interrupted, "And I want you to know it's not just on him. I'm involved too." Jake's face shifted from confusion to shock, and I saw a flicker of hurt. We spent the next hour talking honestly, painfully, and openly. I told him about the tension I'd felt, the confusion, the moments with Linda that had meant more than they should. Linda shared her own feelings, her regrets, and how she never meant to hurt anyone. Jake listened, hurt, but trying to understand. It wasn't easy. There were tears, raised voices, and long silences. But by the end, something had shifted. Not everything was fixed, but the truth was out. The thing I learned most from that night was that honesty, even when it's painful, is the only way to move forward. I don't know what the future holds for any of us, but I do know this. Sometimes the questions we're scared to answer lead us to the most unexpected truths. So what would you have done if you were in my shoes?